My fellow Americans,
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending them in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossiers. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email, and all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about it?
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've
still
already
in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we navigate this crazy clown world together and try to connect the dots together. And we cover the stories the mainstream media is largely ignoring. But in the UK today, the mainstream media is fully invested in this story, which is the conscription of young Brits to join the military for the purposes, of course, of going to war with Russia. This, of course, coming from the UK military as well as the United States military, which has released Pentagon papers recently around this idea of a draft. So getting ready for a hot war with Russia, that is what the UK media is telling us over the past 48 hours.
Plus, the World Health Organization is in panic that the pandemic treaty may be dying on the vine. We're going to look at why they're panicking, what they're saying is the problem. I don't want to say we're winning, but I've pointed out many times how this is a terrible idea. So yeah, I'll say it a little bit. We're winning, guys. Yeah. Let's keep it up.
Let's go. Tedros is crapping his pants right now at the WHO. We're also going to look at what happened in Canada as Tucker Carlson invaded Canada yesterday, literally within the same 24 hours that we got word that Justin Trudeau's government was illegally using intelligence to monitor, spy, and shut down the bank accounts of Canadians, the trucker convoy, and that a federal court has now ruled that the Trudeau administration violated the Constitution of Canada. So we're going to look at all of that. And they are coming for your backyard garden. Yes, you're ruining the earth with your backyard garden. Redacted starts right now. William Makis from Canada is going to be joining us to talk about this cover-up, this Chinese cover-up as it relates to Taiwan and this mRNA vaccine cover-up. It's an unbelievable story. We're going to talk about that as well as Disease X with Dr. William Makis. That's a little bit later in the show.
And also, I'd like to point out that when we've been talking about a draft throughout NATO countries, we were called conspiracy theorists. And now look, conspiracy theorists seem to be having a good year. So, they can take that and suck it. But we first want to tell you about our newsletter before we get to that story. You can find it at redacted.inc. It's a free newsletter. There's no upselling of any kind, no paywalling of any kind. We write it so that you can prepare yourself for the show later in the day, so that you have a link to all original sources that we talk about. So it is the stories we talk about on the show, plus more tidbits, fun things, fun. That's how we roll here on Redacted. Serious but fun. We should put that on a pillow. So please head on over to redacted.inc. Put in your email address. It's totally free. Authenticate the email and you get it. The Redacted newsletter. It's what you want for, Valentine's Day coming up.
Yeah, it's a great Valentine's Day present. Honey, what'd you get me this year? The Redacted newsletter.
Or Carnival, whatever.
I'm going to get it for all. I'm going to sign up all my ladies for Valentine's Day to the Redacted newsletter.
Your whole family is going to be reaching out. They're going to be like, Clayton, Philip, what the heck? Why I'm getting this Redacted newsletter in my inbox. Be like, happy birthday, happy Valentine's Day.
We should put a function where you can gift it, even though it's free. People are like, thank you. But they will thank you.
Well, I get emails from you guys every morning who write to me. They say that the newsletter is your favorite part to start your day. So thank you so much. I love seeing your emails. I just got a great email today from Jose about a really interesting story. So thank you guys I love the interaction. I love the emails back and forth. So yeah, sign up for the newsletter at redacted.inc. Okay, let's get to the news. Well, remember when we were the so-called conspiracy theorists that said the West was getting ready for war with Russia. They laughed. They mocked people like you. They mocked people like me. Well, remember when the so-called conspiracy theorists showed you the Pentagon think tank documents laying out how the United States is preparing to bring back a military draft because a war with Russia and China would cost 3,600 casualties per day, ranging from those killed in action to those who are, mutilated as a result of it. We don't have the men to do it. So we need a draft according to their own documents. Do you remember months ago when we, the so-called conspiracy theorists, said the UK was preparing for conscription, a military draft to battle Russia? Yeah, we covered that here on the show. Do you remember when the so-called conspiracy theorists said that Scandinavia would become the next hot zone for war with Russia? Well, we were right once again. As Ivor Cummings tweeted yesterday, oh my God, do the so-called conspiracy theorists have to be correct on frickin' everything? This would be getting boring if it wasn't so supremely sinister. Yeah, I wish we could laugh about it, but war is not funny. And the thousands of young men who are going to die is not funny at all. Just look at Ukraine, a decimated country as a result of what these globalists want. But we've been calling it out here. So what is he referring to? Well, conscription in Britain. That's what's severely, supremely sinister. Conscription in Britain is what he's referring to, a draft in Britain to get their military ready for war with Russia. This week, the head of the Army of Britain is warning that they need to get their civilian army ready, face reality that a draft to build up a citizen army for potential mobilization against Russia is needed.
The British Army has warned Brits that they could be called up to fight for the king and country in the event of war with Russia.
General Patrick Sanders today called on the British authorities to mobilise the nation, stressing the need for a shift in the minds of the public to be mentally prepared for a military conflict.
Yeah, get mentally prepared. So what exactly is he calling for? Let's go through this. And he says the British Army is facing the same dwindling military as the United States, and the Army will fall to just 72,500 soldiers by 2025. But they would need 120,000 to go to war with Russia. By the way, 120,000? That's what you're going to fight Russia with?
Right. Ukraine already has lost at least that much in just half of the war.
Yeah,
so what are you planning to do?
Yeah, 120,000. Good luck with that. I'm reminded of the Dark Knight, Batman the Dark Knight movie? When the guy's like figures out that Bruce Wayne, is the one who has all the tumblers going all across Gotham City, and he goes in and he meets with Fox and he's like, I have this evidence that Bruce Wayne, he's like, wait a minute, so your plan?
Oh, right. Is to blackmail this one individual.
Yeah, that's what I think of. Like, you're going to go up against this with that? Okay. And then he just says, good luck with that. Right. Good luck with that. See how that's going to roll for you. The general also said he'd like to see the military spending increase, and he'd like to see the nation coalesce around, quote, taking preparatory steps to enable us to place our societies on a war footing when needed are now not desirable but essential. Here's, and by the way, the UK media is really all in on this, really supporting, of course, this new stance. Watch.
But there are reasons why such a senior figure within the military would be saying this. And one of them is to reach the British public and remind them about the state of readiness in this country should the worst happen.
The UK is already involved in supporting multiple war efforts in Ukraine and elsewhere. And while the future of warfare may be unpredictable, the armed forces need people.
I think we've got to be ready. The way the world situation is, it's different.
If you ask the people over 60, they would be up for it. Citizen Army, they would love that idea. The younger generation, I don't think, would be up for it.
But Jade, aged 25, disagrees.
Do you think your generation would kind of be ready to step up like that?
I think so, yeah. I think so. Although everybody would be scared, I think so. I think there's a lot of people that want to help now.
The Defence Secretary insisted that recruiting and retaining members of all of the armed forces is a top priority.
Can you give a commitment now? He'll come to the House before Easter to make a statement about what we're doing about retention of critical armed forces personnel.
I am working very hard to make sure that, in common with actually many Western
militaries, armed forces, that we do have the men and women we need for our armed forces, skilled up to the right levels and capable of taking on this challenge.
Yeah. So before Easter, let's find out how many men we really need and how are we going to keep the people we currently have and then add on the tens of thousands that we need in the UK to go up against Russia.
You know, if you're a journalist and you go out and you say, let's see what the average person on the street says about this. If they talk to at least 10 people, they had to have had footage of someone saying, I do not want that. I do not want my kids to die. I do not want to go myself. They left those people out. So either they really did not find any anti-war voices, or they edited that in a pro-war way. Which one do you think that is? Because I am skeptical that they didn't have anybody on camera that said no thank you to a draft.
Yeah, I mean, there was no one that said no thank you to a
Not
draft.
in their piece?
No.
But I would imagine that more people would say that than not.
Like
no,
a
thank you.
25-year-old Jade who's pushing a baby. It's
Right.
like, yeah, I'm good for that.
What about this baby's father?
Yeah, you know, his father, you know, he's down at the pub anyway. I might as well just send him off to war.
Mm-hmm.
Send him off to fight Russia and die because it's working out really well for Ukraine. In fact, all across the British media, the mainstream media, they're bringing on military experts who support this. Watch.
There's been voices raised showing real concern over our lack of preparedness, our lack of resilience, and most recently over really very abysmal recruiting and retention figures. I mean, the government's plan is to have us reduced formally by 2025 to 72,000 soldiers in the field. Now, that's well below the lowest figure we've ever been since the Napoleonic Wars. But the sad reality of that is, as our current recruiting retention figures continue, we're actually going to be about 70,000. So we're going to be below even that abysmally low figure. And that trend's been the case for nearly 10 years. So there's a real issue now about that, plus a recognition that we live in a very dangerous world. And I think the warnings from the Swedish Prime Minister, who was also the Estonian Prime Minister, that actually within 3 to 5 years, Russia could be in a place where they could do us real harm, is absolutely there. You know, we need to get to a place now where, in a way, it hasn't existed for a generation. Defense spending, and how we organize our armed forces has actually got to become a national issue.
Well, that's a chicken or egg argument, isn't it? The world's dangerous. We make it that way.
Right.
So we could either be peace-mongering. I mean, which came first? Our making the world dangerous or our needing the military, right? Peace is not an option there.
Well, he mentioned Sweden, by the way, if you're paying attention. He mentioned Sweden, which is almost now a NATO member, and Russia has warned that they will not stand by as NATO creeps to their back doorstep. And of course, as a result of that, now Swedes are being told to prepare for war. It's like, well, here's the thing. What if they just didn't do that? Why do they have to prepare for war? A country that has obviously been neutral and for more than 200 years. Now Swedes are calling for the population to prepare for war. This week, top Swedish officials have urged people to prepare for a potential war. Officials said that Sweden must brace for potential confrontation with Russia. The Swedish foreign minister said Stockholm must be realistic and be prepared. The country's defense minister said Russia's war in Ukraine could or will come to Sweden. And then I found this fascinating. So Swedes right now are immediate, like when they heard about this, they're heading to the hardware store. They've been stocking up on equipment, buying crisis kits. We've heard from a number of our Swedish viewers who said, yeah, they're scared. They've been buying fuel, buying lamp oil, matches, water tanks, preparing for a war. So what now? What will America do in this effort? What now? What will the American people do? Will they go along with this boondoggle? Will the Americans go along with the draft in the United States? Scott Ritter is asking this very same question.
The United States Army just had a shortfall in recruiting. They are literally tens of thousands of personnel short of what their authorized manning strength is, which means instead of expanding the U.S. Army, they have to shrink it. They don't have enough men or women to fill the ranks. And so certain units, certain capabilities are being taken down to zero because you don't have manpower to do this. And now Congress is talking about beefing up with what? Are you going to go to a draft? Have you run that by the American people?
Yeah. How do you feel about that? About a draft in the United States? this is obviously all the talk in Britain right now and Sweden, but what about the United States? It's been a great mystery over the past few years. Why are, millions of military-age men arriving in the United States? Of course, many of them coming from China with no families, no luggage. They're given money. They're given refugee status in the United States. And you can see here, you see this massive line of illegal immigrants standing here, just being brought into the United States with their luggage in hand, just standing here with just like a simple little backpack. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Well, up in early December, Dick Durbin, senator from
Illinois,
thank you, was on the floor of Congress, and he explained why all of these people are here potentially.
What troubles me about the debate now about the southern border is it is one half of the immigration equation. Yes, we need order at the border. Yes, we need to have changes in the laws that reflect the reality of the overwhelming numbers from all over the world who are coming to our shores and our border. But there is also an incredible demand for legal immigration into this country even now. The presiding officer, my colleague from the state of Illinois, has legislation which addresses one aspect of that. Her bill, and I hope I describe it accurately, says that if you're an undocumented person in this country and you can pass the physical and the required test, background test, the like, you can serve in our military, and if you do it honorably, we will make you citizens of the United States. Do we need that? Do you know what the recruiting numbers are at the Army and the Navy and the Air Force? They can't reach their quotas each month. They can't find enough people to join our military forces. And there are those who are undocumented who want the chance to serve and risk their lives for this country. Should we give them the chance? I think we should. And let me tell you about...
should we give them a chance?
Let's wrap it up in patriotism.
Die for papers.
Do you want to die? Do you want to die for America? Or is it going to give you citizenship? Bring you in so you can fight our wars? We can go to Scandinavia. We can fight in these foreign wars. It's unbelievable to me.
What about the military now is inspiring to young people to get involved with in the first place? Like, what are they all know what we're doing overseas? We're like, the terrorists of the world. And it's like, what is inspiring people? Like, if you weren't doing that, if you weren't starting all these wars and you had something that was a legitimate cause, you would have people still joining the military. So it's, kind of crazy. They got to bring people from other countries in order to justify these wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, guys, a war in Scandinavia is coming. I mean, just watch my interview with Michael Horn from a few weeks ago where he lays out exactly what's about to happen in Scandinavia. It's no mystery for people who have been paying attention. I know many of you in our audience know exactly what's coming in Scandinavia. It's been in the cards for a long time. So what is America going to do? What is the United Kingdom going to do? Are they going to allow these globalists to push this agenda and to push a draft and a military conscription? Let us know in the comments below what you think about this story. We've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're going to look about why the WHO's pandemic treaty, the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty, they're scared. Yes, the head of the World Health Organization, Tedros, is scared. Is it about to collapse? Have we exposed it? Not just us, but have the anti-globalists help expose this plan. We'll get to that in a second. And Justin Trudeau in Canada busted. Tucker Carlson invading that country yesterday and dropped a few bombs last night. We'll talk about all of that. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Bio-Optimizers, because if your New Year's resolution was to focus on your well-being, then one way you can do that is to improve your sleep, because sleep, as my mom says, repairs the body and helps your overall well-being. And the number one mineral to support good sleep is magnesium. We're actually talking about Magnesium Breakthrough by Bio-Optimizers because it contains 7 different forms of magnesium in this supplement, all of which are involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. Pretty much every function in your body gets upgraded when you take magnesium for good sleep, from the quality of your sleep to your brain function, from metabolism to stress levels. And let's face it, even if your 2024 resolution is not to focus on your health, well, how are you going to kick butt this year without good sleep and stress management? So do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Just go to biooptimizers.com/redacted, enter promo code redacted to get 10% off of any order. Again, that's biooptimizers.com/redacted. Well, the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty is falling apart at the seams, and the WHO is desperate to control the narrative in their favorite term, disinformation. Now, the funny thing is, this is very meta, right? Because the pandemic treaty would give them the right to declare infodemics. We're going to define that later. That just means that they can say this information is dangerous. We're going to shut it down. We have the global authority to do that. But right now, they can't do that. They want to. So the information is hurting them that they can't control. You see what I'm saying here? So here are reports that the WHO head, Dr. Tedros, is very worried about the lack of progress on the pandemic treaty, which he blames on, quote, a torrent of fake news, lies, and conspiracy theories, or maybe actual information about the pandemic treaty itself, because we've laid out how worrying it is. And I'm going to do that again, because we cannot let this out of our sights. So just hold on for a second. But first, I want to show you how world leaders are starting to reject it. Like this guy, this is Robert Fico, the new prime minister of Slovakia, who recently said that Slovakia absolutely will not be joining any pandemic treaty. Thank you very much.
Že smer Slovenská sociálna demokracia nebude podporovať posilnenie právomocí Svetovej zdravotníckej organizácie na úkor suverénnych štátov pri riadení boja proti pandémii.
Yay, look, they're all applauding. They don't want that.
Že takýto nezmysel mohli vymyslieť len nenažraté farmaceutické firmy, ktoré začali vnímať odpor niektorých vlád proti povinnej vakcinácii. Podľa ústavy Slovenskej republiky sa na platnosť takýchto medzinárodných dohôd v prospech Svetovej zdravotníckej organizácie vyžaduje súhlas Národnej rady Slovenskej republiky. A ja neverím, že suverénne slovenské politické strany takýto súhlas vyslovia. Smer a jeho poslanci určite nie.
So hey, in Slovakia, they have a say if they want in on this or not. Americans don't right now. British people don't. They're kind of talking about it, but we really don't. In New Zealand, the new Deputy Prime Minister, Ron Winston Peters, spoke out about this last May in 2023. He posted this. He said the people in New Zealand would be highly concerned that the WHO proposes to effectively take control of independent decision-making away from sovereign countries and place control with the Director General. He called this globalism gone mad. So, hey, in New Zealand, you too get a say. He says that they must first put it forward to a national interest test. That's more than most of us get. And again, this is what Dr. Tedros is calling dishonest speech. Last year on November on X, he posted this, repeating all of these falsehoods as the clock ticks away. He says we find ourselves in a time where fake news, lies, conspiracy theories, and disinformation are rampant. He says these people are saying fake things. They're saying the WHO will impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates on countries. And he says this doesn't grant the WHO any such authority, and he really wants it to happen. Well, this is a lie, and I don't know why this didn't get community noted, because it says in their documents exactly those things, that they can do those things. So I don't know why he's allowed to say it, but let's go over it again, because we need to just keep it in our minds that they do, in fact, say that. Here is the version of the draft that was released just in 2023. See the word binding? Okay, he lied to us. It's binding. What binding powers do they want? Well, they're still defining it. This is based on the draft that is still in draft. They have not, the things that I have highlighted here are the things that I think are potentially problematic. They use the word potential a lot. They use the word One Health surveillance, infodemic, which we're going to get to in a second, interpandemic, which is like baby pandemic inside of a pandemic that's pregnant, maybe with another pandemic. I don't know. They also don't know what recovery means. So they're just not sure when we're ever out of a pandemic either. They're just leaving that open to define for themselves. Now, because we don't know what they mean by infodemic, and they haven't defined it yet in the treaty. We have to look in other WHO documents to look how they define infodemic. So we found this on their website. They say an infodemic is the overabundance of information, accurate or not, which makes it difficult for individuals to adopt behaviors that will protect their health and the health of their families and communities.
So too much information is harming us.
Whether it's true or not, even true information can constitute an infodemic, which is a form of a pandemic.
Whatever happened to information is power?
No, not for them. Well, information is power for us, not for them. A lack of information for us is power for them. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
and it's amazing because though you know that people like YouTube, they're still going to be oppressing people. They're still going to be like shutting things down. So this is like such a 1984 Orwellian thing where the truth itself can be a lie as long as they believe it.
Yes.
So you never have any idea what you're allowed to do and what you're not to do because just coming out with the truth, they can still stop you.
Yeah, it's like what Costanza said on Seinfeld. Jerry, remember when George told him this, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
He wanted to know his secret.
They can just define things as an infodemic. That's true, but if you believe it, it hurts our ability to control you. So we think you shouldn't be able to say that. So again, how will they possibly root out these infodemics? They say, again, these are all their documents I'm showing you. None of this is my interpretation, but I highlighted it. Here is what they say they need to do. Social listening. They need to do a social listening campaign to tackle all this misinformation and disinformation, regular social listening and analysis. Could that be another word for surveillance? In which case everything becomes relevant, not just surveillance with due cause. Would this supersede, as an American, your right to privacy or any other citizen of the world? Also, this worries me. This is the thing that gives me a stomachache equal to all the rest, is this right to redistribute all of society if it thinks there is a risk for a pandemic. It says here, the parties will identify and integrate into relevant pandemic prevention and preparedness plans interventions that address the drivers of the emergence and reemergence of disease at the human-animal environment interface, including but not limited to climate change, land use change, wildlife trade, desertification, and antimicrobial resistance. So they could claim that any type of land is either causing climate change or has the potential to give you a disease and change it. Like, yes, you like eating apples, but we're taking all the apple farms away. Yes, you like eating pigs, but no pigs for you, right? Literally anything, and redistribute wealth and resources. The WHO does say that they take state sovereignty into consideration. It's not that they honor it, they just consider it. But to that end, the WHO changed their international health regulations back in May of 2023. This is sort of like a document beneath a document. This is not part of the pandemic treaty, but they changed sort of the membership rules in preparation for that. And look at this. This document was changed last year. So these edits go into effect with the pandemic treaty. And you can already see where it's going based on this right here. They have just crossed out the word binding. Like our recommendations, standing and temporary, it doesn't mean non-binding anymore. We're just going to get rid of that. It's just, come on, that's a problematic word. And it does not, none of these powers only kick in when we're in a pandemic. It kicks in whenever they feel like we should be preparing for a pandemic. Take a look at this. It gives us regulations to protect and prepare, right? Make sure that we're resilient. So the underlying text here is not, with only the red is what I did. The dark is what they're proposing, the black underlines. So do we need to give them more power? Here's the graphic I made last year, February 2023, and I stand by it. Here's all the things that they want to grab with this CA plus pandemic preparedness. And again, our biggest problem is that we don't need it. The WHO did a terrible job with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we as humans got through it, so we don't need to give them power to do another terrible job. that they neither prevented nor solved the COVID-19 pandemic. So they don't get more from this. But they're taking these powers under the auspices of emergency. I've shown you this before, and I will do it again. Herbert Hoover's warning to us about the kind of people or organizations that grab power under the guise of emergency. Every collectivist revolution rides in on a Trojan horse of emergency. It was the tactic of Lenin, Hitler, Mussolini. In the collectivist sweep over a dozen minor countries of Europe, it was the cry of men striving to get on horseback. And emergency became the justification of the subsequent steps. This technique of creating emergency is the greatest achievement that demagoguery attains. And so, yes, Dr. Tedros is in good company of those leaders I just mentioned, using the illusion of emergency. And he's really worried that time is passing and this illusion of emergency is slipping through his fingers. Look at this quote, what he said just this week in Geneva at a WHO board. Time is short. There are several outstanding issues that remain to be solved. Failure to strike an agreement would be a missed opportunity for which future generations may not forgive us. Like, why can't we do this later if we think it's an awesome thing? What pandemic are we in now? Why is time of the essence right now? He called for a strong agreement that will help protect our children and grandchildren from future pandemics. He says this claims that it would give them sovereign power is completely false. We cannot allow this historic agreement, this milestone in global health, to be sabotaged. So, again, I don't want to say like we are winning because I should be unbiased on this, but I think I'm making a case that this pandemic treaty is a terrifying authoritarian power grab. And so the fact that it seems to be faltering because world leaders see it too means that people who are like-minded are winning.
Why should you be unbiased about this horrible pandemic treaty that will enslave all of us to globalists?
Yeah, I'm not here. I try to be unbiased about politics and things like that. But for this, I'm not here to be unbiased. I should admit that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let us know what you think of this, how we can keep the pressure on our leaders. Do that, you guys. I think we should do that. That's what I think. Tell us what you think.
Coming up on the show, we're going to talk about Justin Trudeau, and he went to a hockey game yesterday while his country is collapsing. And, of course, he's avoiding the strong eye of the judiciary, which, of course, the federal courts have now said that he violated the rights of the citizens of Canada by invading their privacy, locking down their bank accounts, using intelligence to track these individuals, and then sharing that intelligence with Five Eyes nations. This is unbelievable. We're going to look at what happens in Canada. And Tucker Carlson was there last night. We'll show you some of that amazing event last night. Plus, we're going to talk about this China mRNA vaccine cover-up. Dr. William Makis is going to be joining us here on the show a little bit later in the show. So make sure you stick around for that. But first, are you tired of being lied to by Wall Street? They tell you to put your money in an IRA or a 401k. By the way, an IRA and a 401k are about the worst retirement vehicles you can possibly imagine, filled with hidden fees that enrich Wall Street and take money away from you. You're risking your life savings when you're playing the Wall Street casino. They say it's a secure investment for your future, yet studies show the average American who follows that advice will outlive their savings by 10 years. So your savings runs out because you made Wall Street rich, and then your savings is gone. So bank on yourself is a better way to grow and protect your hard-earned money. This retirement plan alternative has never had a losing year in over 160 years. It's guaranteed predictable growth and retirement income. So with Bank on Yourself, your plan doesn't go backward when the markets tumble. Your principal and growth are locked in. Tax-free retirement income. You'll know when your tax rate will be in retirement, 0 under your current tax law, which protects you from the coming tax tsunami. And you are in control. You get to access your money from anywhere, for any purpose, no questions asked, without government penalties or restrictions on how much you can take or when you can take it out. Try doing that with your 401k. It's not going to happen. So what you need to do is check out our friends over at Bank on Yourself. Do you want guaranteed predictable annual growth, control of your money, tax-free retirement income. Then go to bankonyourself.com/redacted. You need to use that URL because they're going to send you a free report and a proven retirement plan alternative that banks and Wall Street are desperately hoping you never hear about. Just go to bankonyourself.com/redacted for your free report. That's bankonyourself.com/redacted. Well, it turns out Justin Trudeau abused his power, abused the power of the government, violated the Constitution, illegally used intelligence to spy on, freeze the bank accounts of his own citizens, according to a federal court in Canada. This is monumental. Tucker Carlson also invaded Canada last night to a massive sellout crowd and has been making ripples across that country, destroyed the prime minister in his speech last night, calling him out over systemic anti-Christian hate in Canada, among other things. Listen.
I'm telling you this because there's kind of no more inoffensive and peaceful group in the world than the Christians. In fact, there isn't. The religion tells them, commands them to turn the other cheek and to put the concerns of others above their own concerns. So if you have a problem with those precepts, explain it to me. Speak slowly so I can understand. I think every person in this room, regardless of your faith, can agree, yeah, I'm for that. I wish I was more like that. That's good. We need more of those people in society. Serve others for the sake of service. People who pray for their enemies. Who does that? Who would pray for an enemy? No one, except the Christians, and they do. They're commanded to. So if you're hassling that group, maybe you've got another agenda that we should be concerned about, even if we're not in that group. If we burn 90 of their churches to the ground, and the Prime Minister and his little weird buddies are endorsing that, burning churches, if you're on the side of burning churches, let me just say, I don't need any other facts of the case, you're on the wrong side.
He also mocked Trudeau and said he'd love to have him take a 23andMe test to see if he's really Fidel Castro's son down there in Cuba.
But he will collapse under the weight of his own ludicrousness and go back to Cuba or do whatever he does. But, what? You know, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's just too great to check. Though if I ever meet him, I'm going to demand a 23andMe, like right away.
Joining me now is Canadian journalist David Creighton, who's been tracking and writing extensively about Trudeau's criminal behavior and the abuse of power of the government there in Canada. And David joins us now. David, welcome to the show.
Nice to be back, Clayton.
So I want to get your take first on this federal court ruling, and then we'll talk some Tucker here in a moment. Is this as big a deal as we think it is, that the federal court comes down and says the Trudeau government here has violated the Constitution and basically abused the power of the government to go after Canadian citizens?
It is, as you said, it's monumental because it represents a rift in the Canadian establishment, the deep state in Canada. The judiciary is clearly not going to back Justin Trudeau when he does something that's clearly unconstitutional. And Federal Court Justice Richard Mosley stated this week that the invocation of the Emergencies Act to suppress the Freedom Convoy, the trucker protest, was unreasonable, in quotation marks, was unjustified, and was unconstitutional, that he went way beyond his reach as a government, that there was no national emergency, there was no reason to invoke this draconian and authoritarian law. And this is absolutely incredible because this is the second time in a couple of months that a federal court has said Trudeau has gone too far. They said so in December over the plastics policy, the single-use plastics policy. Now they're saying he went too far with the Emergencies Act. And this is galvanizing supporters of people who say enough of Justin Trudeau from a lot of different political movements, a lot of different political parties, but it certainly is helping Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who supported the Freedom Convoy initially, kept supporting that Freedom Convoy, has been under tremendous pressure by woke politicians in his own party to go against that Freedom Convoy, but this has justified his courage in saying they were right and Trudeau was wrong. And so this is a huge, huge decision.
Let's talk about some of the specifics of this decision and looking at specifically the disinformation to invoke the Emergencies Act, so that the government, Canadian government, used fake information, disinformation to invoke using the Emergencies Act. And then we'll get into sharing that information, spying on your own citizens, and then sharing it with the other Five Eyes nations. I mean, to me, that is treasonous. That is treasonous behavior. So let's talk about the disinformation. What types of disinformation was Trudeau putting out, invoking to use and then clamp down on power and clamp down on these truckers?
Well, for the viewers who aren't aware of the Five Eyes, those are the great English-speaking democracies. These are the bulwark of freedom in the world. United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And they routinely share information. Well, it seems that they routinely share disinformation as well. And they are actively working against populist movements, small c conservatives, libertarians, anybody opposing this globalist agenda. And what kind of disinformation were they sharing? Well, where have you heard this before? These populists are really white supremacists. They're really Nazis. They're really working for far-right organizations. This kind of information was out there immediately in January 2022 when the Freedom Convoy descended upon Ottawa. Justin Trudeau immediately started equating the Freedom Convoy protesters to Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
There was talk of Hitler. There was talk of these people being far-right extremists, white supremacists, the same kind of language that you hear Joe Biden using against people in the United States who are opposed to his policies. When he uses the Justice Department and the FBI against school board parents who don't like critical race theory. When he uses the judiciary to persecute former President Donald Trump. This is the same kind of language that these people, anyone who opposes these globalist-inspired governments, are somehow far-right Nazis and white supremacists. White supremacists under every bed. And this was the information that immediately came forth when the Freedom Convoy started, and Justin Trudeau started using that language almost immediately. They were misogynistic. They were racist. These people were a fringe element. Once again, these are all buzzwords that are being shared amongst the Five Eyes, and it's all disinformation.
Right, and Michael Schellenberger, a journalist, also pointing out that through his publication, Public, that they discovered specific instances of where the government was using fake intelligence to illegally frame these protesting truckers. In fact, we highlighted here a number of months ago, putting up fake white supremacist signs on poles and on trucks, using Nazi symbolism and things like that, which were totally fake, that the government was using and fake and repurposing this information that didn't even exist in order to frame these protesters. Can you speak a little bit more about that? And this, I don't know if any of this came up in that, of course, some of the court cases that you've been sitting in on, watching unfold.
Well, just like the January 6th insurrection fraud, and that's really what it was, and I think we all know that now, there was no insurrection. There was a lot of arrests of people who just happened to be standing around. And these people are still languishing in prison. The same case is happening here in Canada. We have people who were arrested during the Freedom Convoy protest, not just in Ottawa, but at the Coutts, Alberta border crossing. We got 4 members of that protest group that are still languishing in jail. And for what? We're not even sure what they're accused of. The RCMP claimed that they arrested 13 people who had firearms and explosives at the site. There's ample evidence now that this cache of firearms wasn't even seized at the border. It had nothing to do with these Coutts protesters. The RCMP, the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, and the Ottawa Police all claimed that the Ottawa protesters had firearms. This information was out there from day one, that these people had guns, that they had an arsenal, that they were planning some kind of insurrection. Where did you hear that one? Against the government. There wasn't a single explosive, a single bomb, a single gun or firearm found in Ottawa at all. And what makes this even more bizarre is that Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act, a very draconian measure. It used to be called the War Measures Act, after the problems at the border were resolved. So it was completely aimed at the peaceful protest in Ottawa. And as soon as that order was invoked on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2022, the police brutally put down this peaceful protest. I was there to witness it. And finally, we have a judge in Canada who's saying, not only was this improper, not only should a democratic government not be beating up its citizens for disagreeing with the government, but this is completely based on myth. It was completely based on disinformation. There was no national emergency. And no matter what Chrystia Freeland wants to keep pretending, and Justin Trudeau, by the way, hasn't even had the guts to come out publicly and comment on this issue. He puts his little deputy prime minister, finance minister out there to defend the government, but he hasn't got the moxie or the guts to go out and publicly comment on this when a judge has told him he's gone way over his authority.
Well, and of course you have a grandmother, 62-year-old grandmother who was like strip searched, ripped apart. Says the lies that the Trudeau government has been pushing has been, it's been total lies, that they planted this cache of weapons. And of course you have the arrests of these men who have now I think been in prison for over 700 days without any reason. They've not given them any due process at this point. They've been languishing in prison, right? It's unbelievable.
And we have a Métis woman who was literally trampled by a police horse and had a shoulder dislocated. Now, I've talked to Candace many times about this, and I correspond with her from time to time. Now, what about all of these people? This is another unanswered question. What about all of these people who had physical harm upon them because of the police action? What about the people who had bank accounts frozen as a result of this action and who had financial dislocation? What about this huge lawsuit against Freedom Convoy? Is this all null and void now? I think it should be.
Yeah, and when will Justin Trudeau be removed from office? Because there's plenty of Canadians that are saying, you thought the trucker convoy protests were bad. Wait until if Trudeau doesn't leave office or be removed from office, the protests are going to be much larger than that. And of course, they will use these same tactics in the United States over the next week to 2 weeks. As this massive trucker convoy is heading to the U.S. southern border, liberal media will call them racists. They'll call them white supremacists. And of course, I guarantee you we'll see some of the same similar action that we saw on January 6th. You'll see sort of an invasion of these groups. You'll see people with white hoods walking around with their masks fully over their face, and we'll know exactly where those individuals come from. And all you need to do is look to Canada. Before I let you go, I do want to talk about Tucker Carlson. So, huge event last night. He beforehand made a joke calling the Justin Trudeau's office before his arrival, saying we're coming to restore liberty, we're coming to liberate Canada, and we're on our way. Please let the Prime Minister know. And it was a huge speech last night. It was a packed house, and he really took some big shots at Trudeau, specifically on like Christian persecution in Canada, among other things. How was it received there in Canada?
Well, from those who were there, it was a moment in time they'll never forget, because Tucker, of course, is completely honest. He's not afraid to say things that a lot of Canadian media are afraid to say. I'm not one of them, but they are. Right. And he's unapologetic. And he went after, of course, the comment about Justin Trudeau's possible connection to Fidel Castro. It's been a rumor from day one that his real father is Fidel Castro. A lot of journalists are even afraid to say that, but it's all over. It's been all over social media for the last 8 years. And Tucker, of course, mentioned that he made a lot of jokes about Justin Trudeau that would be considered beyond the pale by our very timid press corps here in Canada. But this is exactly what is needed. We need people like Tucker Carlson to shake up this establishment in Canada, shake up a press corps that is often afraid to comment about reality, to be quite truthful about this, and is very afraid to go after Justin Trudeau. For whatever reason, this is a wounded politician, and with this decision this week, he is more in danger than ever of being forgotten and being completely marginalized as a leader. And this is something we can't forget. So Tucker was a hit. You can look at the social media response in Canada. It was tremendous, and people really appreciated this visit.
Well, it was great to watch a lot of the chunks of the speech. So I know I know it was very well received from what I saw, and Justin Trudeau should be shaking in his boots, because I think in this speech plus this court ruling this week, this is an electric shock to the Canadian people. So we stand with the Canadian people on this, and we hope that they manage to get this guy out of office as soon as possible. David Creighton, thank you so much. As always, great to see you up there in Canada, and we will talk real soon. Thanks so much, David.
Thank you, Clayton.
Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate it. And just amazing to see the response up there in Canada to Tucker's appearance. And he also dropped some more bombs there, specifically on the euthanasia laws, which we didn't really even touch on. But that was another big part of his speech last night, saying basically this is a genocide in Canada. You're literally government-sanctioned suicides with the MAID program there going after these people. So a lot of truth had there last night. We've got more news to get to here. Dr. William Makis is going to join us here in a few minutes to talk about this China mRNA cover-up. We're also going to talk about Disease X, and they are coming for your garden. Globalists now saying, yes, your garden, your backyard garden, is more problematic than the bigger farms. We'll tell you all about that. But first, right now, if you're looking at gold prices and silver prices, they are hitting, gold hitting all-time highs. Silver right now still about half of its all-time high price right now. We're big proponents of investing a portion of your savings into these precious metals, real tangible assets. A friend of mine the other day offline, I won't mention his name, reached out to me and he said, I want to start saving up for retirement. I want to be smarter with my money. What do you recommend? And I said, it's simple. Gold and silver and real estate. And even if it's just a portion of your money right now to put it in, he's going to buy some silver. And the reason is, he's like, I'm not looking for it to be like a massive growth of wealth, like it's going to blow up in price. I want to protect my money right now. And that's why he's investing in silver. And that's why we're big proponents of it, because it's wealth preservation. And our friends over at Lear Capital can help you keep your money safe and help you get set up with your own gold and silver account right now. All you need to do is call their 800 number and they will help you. They are fantastic people. They'll send you a free guide. So call their 800 number, 1-800-613-3557, or go to the website learredacted.com. They'll send you your free gold and silver guide. They have over 25 years experience, thousands of 5-star reviews, and a risk-free guarantee that gives you 24 hours to review your purchase before committing to it. So let's say you're on the phone with them and you'd like to buy a few $1,000s of gold, a few $1,000s of silver, like a mix of both. That's what Natalie and I do. And then you go to sleep and you wake up and you're like, no, I'd rather go play the lottery. I'd rather go waste my money or something. You could call them and say, you know what, I changed my mind. So you have 24 hours to make a decision on that. And then you can keep the gold in your own house, in your own vault, in your own safe, in your own gun safe if you want. Or you can have it held off-site in a storage facility that's under 24-hour guard. Totally up to you. And that's your choice. But I would call them right now, 1-800-613-3557. Tell them the Clayton over at Redacted sent you. They're fantastic people. Again, American company, really great guys. Go to learredacted.com or call their 800 number, 1-800-613-3557 today.
All right, well, are they coming for your home garden now? Because your home garden has a higher carbon footprint than an industrial garden. I mean, that's kind of a no-duh, but okay, we're going to go through this because this new study makes me think that maybe they are. Here's a new study that suggests that urban gardens have a higher carbon footprint than conventionally grown produce. In this study, researchers say gardens like this one, they're bad for the earth, worse than conventional farming. Now, why this worries me is because when we see globalists tell you what has a high carbon footprint, then they're signaling to us what they're going to start tamping down on. What that makes me think of is collectivization, which we're going to talk about in a second. But this is like, duh, right? Like anything I make at home is going to be more efficient if it scales. Like, okay, if I'm sewing clothes,
put another way, it's less efficient at home.
Everything is less efficient at home.
Like if
right?
you try to build your own car, it's not going to probably be as efficient as Ford can do it. With
Absolutely. You can make that argument with everything, right? That if it's made in a factory versus me with my own hands, there's going to be less carbon footprint of all the McDonald's hamburgers than what I make in my house. The Japanese have a word for this. I forget what it is now. And of course, industrial farming is going to be more efficient with farms like this. Here's a video that I just thought you might enjoy watching because I could watch this all day.
That's amazing.
I don't pick apples and carrots to this efficiency.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So isn't this fun?
It's so satisfying.
It's so satisfying to watch that. I'm going to let this run while I talk. The study further showed that fruit is found to be 8.6 times more eco-friendly when grown conventionally compared to a city. Whereas vegetables are 5.8 times better for the environment when left to the professionals. I think it's the Japanese concept of Kaizen is like automation makes things more efficient and you learn as you do it, right?
Right.
So, okay, no duh, right? So why is this a concern, this study? Is there an agenda to stop you from doing this?
Yes.
Could this be used against you?
Yes.
Right. And so I just want to remind you that we're not too far off from periods of history where people were starved to death in order to control them. One period was the collectivization period we just mentioned in the previous segment under the Stalin-led Soviet Union. He ordered police to seize privately held farms in Ukraine and turn those farms into grain farms. And those people had nothing left except for what the government would dole out to them, which was practically nothing. More than 1 million Ukrainian farmers were exiled and tens of thousands starved, many of them children. Now, according to journalist and writer Anna Reid, Ukrainians and Russians are still afraid to talk about this. This comes from her book, Borderland. She says finding Ukrainians who are willing to talk about the famine is surprisingly hard. The younger generations have been told little by their parents and grandparents for fear that such talk might compromise their careers, even their lives. It's just it wasn't something we talked about in our family. It was a typical comment. The old who remember it firsthand are dying off fast and do not like confiding in strangers. So it was that traumatizing, but the death toll was astounding. Look at these estimates. Exactly how many people died is unclear. But as Khrushchev admitted in his memoirs, no one was counting. Some say 4 to 5 million, others say 5 million Ukrainians and 2 million elsewhere in the Soviet Union. Another 6.5 million, he said, died in I can't say that word. You read it there. If conquest is right, the whole operation killed over twice as many as the Holocaust. 34 lives, not for every word, but for every letter in this book, she says. So it's terrible. And here's a horrifying example of just how bad it got. One family said they sold everything, their icons, clothes, pillows, to buy rye. But by the winter, they were living off anything they could find. People were eating straw and lime tree leaves, making kasha out of bark and nettles. She said she went to see her uncle. This is awful. I'm just warning you. And they were served a stew, and they saw it was made from mice. There were tails sticking out of it. Ugh. They said compared to most villages, though, they were lucky because they could trawl, which was illegal, which is using your blankets to fish in the river for fish or mullocks. Even so, she says 2 families died. Some got so bad that they were killing their children and eating them. Okay, so do I show you this to scare you? Maybe a little. Yeah, I think it's worth saying, like, let's never do that again. If I'm manipulating you, I'm at least honest about it, right? I'm showing you this so that we never do this again, right? That's my purpose here, not just to be sensational. Because when people are discouraged from growing their own food, I tend to get a little worried. Who would fund a study like this, right? And it seems to go hand in hand with the rhetoric at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, where crazies like this lady said farming is a problem and we need to start punishing people who do it.
I mean, ecocide as a word is becoming better known around the world, and the concept is generally mass damage and destruction of nature. But legally speaking, what our organisation and other collaborators aim to do is to have this recognised legally as a serious crime. Because one of the issues that sort of pervades all of this discussion is that we have a kind of cultural, very ingrained habit of not taking damage to nature as seriously as we take damage to people and property. And that, I mean, you know, if you're campaigning for human rights, at least you know mass murder, torture, all of these things are serious crimes. But there's no equivalent in the environmental space. And so, you know, unlike an international crime like genocide that involves a specific intent, with ecocide, what we see is actually what people are trying to do, what businesses are trying to do, is make money, is farm, is fish, is do all of these things that are, producing energy and so on, as well. But what's missing is the awareness and the conscience around the side effects, around the collateral damage that happens with that.
Okay, so I don't know how she intends to eat, but here's another lady who says that, yeah, because farming is so problematic, just get used to AI-made food.
A lot of our things, what you can do is scarcity, and we have products which you can make via biology. It's so that you can replace or augment natural products, especially with climate change making them more difficult to produce. The other thing that you can use with AI is increase your solution space. So if you love the taste and aroma of vanilla, can we have something that's reminiscent of that is new to the world, and using AI to increase that solution space that a human alone would not be able to do? So that's something we're definitely leveraging, using receptor biology data and millions of data points there, using our understanding of taste and smell to identify what can be new that can help consumers to have sustainable solutions that are also really desirable, right?
Can you imagine having dinner with that woman? Yeah, we're not going to have vanilla dessert tonight, but I did bring a Yankee candle that
you can chew on that.
You can chew on that, or I'm going to light it. You can just smell that Yankee vanilla candle.
By the way, we have AI vanilla.
Like
we already have synthetic vanilla. But go ahead.
It's the homeopathy of dinner. Just a little bit of what you want to eat in there, like just the smell,
but you can't eat it.
Right.
Well, the sad thing is, like, we're already kind of seeing that happen because the farmers that are subsidized in the United States are the ones that are growing like corn for high fructose corn syrup and feed for animals and things. And actual farmers are being suffocated and not being subsidized, so they're losing. And then you have even smaller farmers that are doing like organic meat and organic vegetables that get no subsidies at all. So it's already happening. They're starting to weed out actual farmers and actual food. And Bill Gates is buying up all this property. So, I mean, it's basically the groundwork's being laid for that to happen.
Yeah, and now you have these studies that are trying to force this hand, right? So now we have these studies, and now you're going to have the globalists saying we need to get rid of these small farms and roll them into the bigger farms.
Right. You shouldn't be farming. It should only be mass-produced things that we tell you and we give you.
And by the way, it won't be meat. It'll be beyond meat. It'll be a fake meat burger.
Right. And climate
and it's
research.
Have mRNA in it.
Probably. Climate researchers have by no means concluded that carbon output drives climate change, but they're still taking the time to calculate it from your raised garden bed. And they warned us, here's a summary from the World Economic Forum themselves about their Davos summit, saying that, they're not going to use the term phase out anymore. They did that a lot in 2023, and it made people nervous. Instead, they're going to say contribute to transitioning away from. Does that make you feel better? So they may say this about your home garden. They're not going to phase it out, but you will contribute to transitioning away from home gardening for the climate. How do you feel about that? Now watch this other crazy lady drone on about how we should no longer even measure the economy based on what we produce in terms of food and things to live on. We should measure, instead of GDP, we should measure just based on what nature gives us back. She calls it GEP. I warn you, she drones on. This is crazy talk, but we're going to watch it together. It's about a minute. Dig in.
There is a lot of hope, actually, and that comes through recognizing that financial systems do offer a chance to begin redressing the problem with nature being invisible in accounting and in so many types of decisions. And just to answer quickly, there's a new metric that's come forth called gross ecosystem product that's supported by a lot of science and data and is becoming actionable now and adopted by a suite of countries at an experimental initial phase. And we can think about gross ecosystem product, GEP, as somewhat parallel to GDP, gross domestic product. GDP is basically all the goods and services from an economy, where GEP is looking at all the goods and services coming from nature to people. It was adopted by the UN, approved the UN Statistical Commission in 2021. And
okay,
wow.
So how many of you, when you watched that, flashed to this scene in Notting Hill, which is supposed to be a comedy?
Because some woodcock.
No, thank you. I'm a fruitarian.
What is a fruitarian exactly?
Well, we believe that fruits and vegetables have feelings, so we think cooking is cruel. We only eat things that have actually fallen from the tree or bush and that are in fact dead already.
Ah. All right. Right. So, these carrots?
Have been murdered, yes.
Murdered? Gosh, poor old carrots. It's beastly.
So that's supposed to be a joke, but that's what this woman, either we stand there and wait for what nature gives us in GEP, right? We don't produce it ourselves because that's ecocide. So that's what these crazy people are thinking. Let us know if you think we're interpreting this right or if we're being panicked. I don't know. I'm open to all interpretations. I'd love your thoughts on the matter.
Well, we've got more news to get to. Dr. William Mackis is going to join us here in a moment. We're going to do that on another platform. We can't do it on YouTube, so we're going to have to, in a moment here, just sort of end our time here on YouTube. But you know where to find us if you'd like to join us to watch that interview. We're going to continue our live stream unabated. It will continue on this other platform. You see that link down below. So we will continue there, but we are going to end our time here on YouTube in a moment.